If you feel like the truth is being kept from us, know that you're not alone. I'm Detective Ozma, and my mission is to dig up the evidence behind the mysteries they want to bury. Today, I'm reopening a case that began with a silent light descending over a remote lake in Maine and ended with 4 men claiming that, for several unaccounted hours, they were taken somewhere they could neither explain nor fully remember. In August of 1976, deep within the isolated expanse of the Allagash Wilderness Waterway, miles from the nearest town and surrounded by dense forest and dark water, 4 friends watched a glowing sphere hover above the tree line before a beam of blue light engulfed their canoe, after which they found themselves back on shore, disoriented, exhausted, and unable to account for a significant gap in time that should not have existed. For more than a decade, they remembered almost nothing beyond the light itself, until recurring nightmares began to surface, detailed, invasive, and disturbingly consistent, forcing them to question whether that missing time concealed something far more deliberate than confusion or fatigue. Jack and Jim Weiner, along with Charlie Faltz and Chuck Rack, believed they had embarked on nothing more than a routine summer canoe trip, yet what unfolded would eventually become one of the most documented and controversial alleged abduction cases in American history. When I examined the Allagash file, what struck me most was not merely the extraordinary nature of the claims, but the remarkable consistency across decades of interviews, independent hypnosis sessions, psychological evaluations, and public testimony, consistency that, while compelling, does not automatically confirm truth. So tonight, we examine the evidence. Evidence 1, the return of the light. On August 26, during a late-night fishing excursion on Eagle Lake, the 4 men paddled away from their campsite, leaving behind a deliberately constructed bonfire intended to serve as a visual guide in the darkness, a precaution that would later become central to their claim of missing time. At approximately 9 o'clock in the evening, Chuck Rack reported an overwhelming sensation of being observed, a primal awareness that compelled him to turn toward the shoreline across the lake, where he saw a massive, spherical light hovering silently above the trees, motionless and without any visible means of propulsion. In an attempt to provoke a rational explanation, Charlie Faltz flashed an SOS signal in Morse code toward the object, expecting either no response or perhaps a delayed reaction, yet what followed was immediate and deeply unsettling, as a concentrated beam of blue light projected downward in a widening cone that descended directly toward their canoe and enveloped them in an unnatural glow. The group reacted in panic, paddling desperately toward shore, although Rack would later describe feeling momentarily transfixed, as though the light itself exerted a paralyzing influence over his perception. Evidence 2, the missing hours. According to their accounts, one moment they were engulfed in the beam, and the next they found themselves already back on land, standing near their campsite in a state of confusion and overwhelming fatigue, while the luminous object hovered above them at a distance close enough to be clearly visible before accelerating upward at extraordinary speed and disappearing into the night sky. What disturbed them most, however, was not merely the departure of the object, but the condition of the fire they had left burning. The substantial logs they believed would last for hours had been reduced to glowing embers, a detail incompatible with their internal perception that no more than 20 minutes had passed. Despite the strangeness of the event, none of the 4 men engaged in extended discussion that night, nor did they display the heightened adrenaline or obsessive analysis one might expect after witnessing something extraordinary. Instead, they reported an unusual wave of exhaustion that compelled them to sleep, behavior that Jack Weiner would later describe as deeply uncharacteristic, as though an external influence discouraged reflection. Evidence 3, the emergence of nightmares. For more than 10 years, the experience remained incomplete in their memories, defined primarily by the aerial sighting and the inexplicable time discrepancy, until the late 1980s, when Jim Weiner suffered a severe accident that resulted in neurological complications, including seizures and episodes of sleep paralysis. During these episodes, Jim began reporting vivid encounters involving humanoid figures levitating above his bed, sharp instruments piercing his skin, and a clinical environment that felt detached and methodical rather than chaotic or dreamlike. Around the same period, both Jim and his twin brother Jack began experiencing nearly identical recurring nightmares in which they found themselves inside a brightly illuminated room, unclothed and immobilized, surrounded by small beings with enlarged heads and dark, reflective eyes, while a voice communicated telepathically, instructing them not to fear and to comply. The striking similarity of these dreams prompted them to contact UFO researcher Raymond Fowler, who proposed hypnotic regression as a means of recovering what he believed might be suppressed memories. Evidence 4. The hypnosis sessions. Under separate regression sessions conducted independently to prevent cross-contamination of testimony, Jack, Jim, and Charlie each described being transported aboard a craft after the blue beam engulfed their canoe, where they were allegedly subjected to medical-like examinations involving the extraction of biological samples and the use of unfamiliar instruments. Charlie compared the interior to a sterile surgical environment, recalling mechanical panels lowering over his body, while Jack described alien faces observing him at close range with apparent clinical detachment. Notably, the men later produced drawings of the interior space and the entities they claimed to have encountered, and those illustrations bore significant similarities despite the sessions being conducted separately. Polygraph examinations suggested that they believed their accounts to be truthful, and psychiatrist Dr. John Mack of Harvard University reported no evidence of psychosis or intentional fabrication after evaluating them. However, critics such as psychologist Dr. William Cohn argued that hypnosis is not a reliable tool for memory retrieval and may instead facilitate the construction of detailed but false narratives influenced by cultural imagery already embedded in the subconscious through films, books, and media. The case gained national attention, leading to books, televised reenactments, and public appearances that solidified the group's reputation as the Allagash 4, whose testimonies remained largely consistent for decades. Until 2016. Before I close this file, two final pages stand out. The first contains a public reversal. In August 2016, Chuck Rack stated in a newspaper interview that no abduction had occurred, asserting that while the UFO sighting itself was genuine, the subsequent narrative of alien examination was constructed later, influenced in part by the use of potent hashish on the night of the incident, which he claimed could have distorted their perception of time. Rack further admitted that he did not recover specific abduction memories under hypnosis and suggested that he had supported the story over the years in hopes of financial gain or media opportunity, though he did not retract his claim that they witnessed unexplained aerial phenomena. The second page documents the response from the remaining three men, who categorically rejected Rack's statements, denying any drug influence during the event and insisting that the fire's condition could not be explained by miscalculation alone, while reaffirming their confidence in the hypnosis sessions, polygraph results, and decades-long consistency of their testimony. So now, two possibilities remain. The first is psychological, that an extraordinary sighting, combined with altered perception, suggestion, and the reconstructive nature of memory, evolved over time into a shared narrative reinforced by hypnosis and cultural archetypes. The second possibility is far more unsettling, that four young men were subjected to an experience beyond conventional explanation, returned with partial amnesia, and left to reconcile fragments of a reality that one of them may later have chosen to reject. This structure may sound familiar. Years before Allagash, another couple, driving home on an ordinary night in New Hampshire, reported a missing stretch of time, medical examinations described under hypnosis, and memories that surfaced only after psychological distress forced them to confront what had been buried. In that case, too, the line between trauma, suggestion, and something genuinely unexplained remains unresolved. When separate cases, separated by geography and years, begin to echo the same elements, missing time, clinical environments, telepathic communication, recovered memories, the question becomes harder to ignore: are we observing a cultural pattern, or a recurring phenomenon? If you want to examine that earlier file in detail, the full investigation into the Betty and Barney Hill case is already available here on the channel. The Allagash case remains suspended between confession and conviction, between skepticism and belief, and nearly 50 years later, the silence of Eagle Lake continues to hold unanswered questions. I'm Detective Ozma, and I'll keep gathering every fragment, every voice, every piece of evidence they try to erase. Many stories get buried, but never forever. If you, or someone you know, has ever witnessed something unexplainable, leave your story in the comments. Or, if you'd rather stay anonymous, send it to the email pinned in the comments. Who knows, maybe the next file I open will be yours.